All right, a couple of announcements. One is that over the Christmas break, there's a seminar that is a 3-credit seminar, Build Your Own Business. And it runs Monday, December 14th at 8:30 to Friday, December 18th at 9. So it's 1 week during the break, and it's worth 3 credits. It costs $999. You learn to make your business, prepare a business plan, market your business, develop a financial plan, determine legal and tax strategies, how to recruit and staff. So if you're if you're interested, you can pick up 3 credits. It's outside your normal tuition. It's an additional $999, but you can stop by, if you're interested in doing that, stop by the secretary's office in lane 215 and let her know that you're, her name's Jeanette, let her know that you're interested in that. Another thing is there's a 9th Annual Douglas B. Rogers Conditions of a Free Society essay competition. Why this is interesting is that, well, first of all, first place, there's a competition. First place is $2,000, second place is $1,000, and third place is $500. And you can write it over Christmas break because it's not due till January 15th. But what the essay has to be on is a passage from Ludwig von Mises's Liberalism. And so everybody in here has read Ludwig von Mises' Liberalism. They want you to comment on the intellectual origins of this quotation from liberalism and its significance for cultivating virtues necessary to sustain a free society. So anyway, if you're interested in that, just send me an email and I'll give you the connection to this. But again, if you don't have a lot to do over break, then the opportunity cost of your time might be low. And so go ahead and do that. It is also, if you wish, it's going to be published in the Center's journal, Citizens and Statesmanship. So you'll get a publication out of it, and you might win some money out of it. So anyway, the marginal cost might be low, given that you've already read Mises's Liberalism. All right. Okay. I didn't do a classic album of the week because I hadn't done Monday's band pick of the week. So Monday, I'll give you both the band pick of the week for next week, and I'll give you a classic album of the week. So the band pick of the week this week is a band out of Texas, and it was formed in 2016, and it's called Midland. Anybody heard Midland? So yeah, there's a couple people in the other class that heard it as well. So anyway, I believe they just had their second album out, so you might want to go ahead and take a listen to that. There's a song on there called Mr. Lonely that you might want to take a listen to. So get on Spotify or whatever and listen to the band Midland. All right. So what we did last time is we finished up Bastiat's The Law, and now we're moving into Hayek's Constitution of Liberty. And of course, Hayek wrote this in 1960. He won the Nobel Prize in Economics in the 70s. And again, we've noted that what he has been, or when we've been talking about Mises and talking about Bastiat, we noted that there's some things that they said back in 1850 and 1927 that is going to be part of what Hayek talks about in the Constitution of Liberty. And in the introduction, he says, we have to clarify our aims and principles. I sort of think about that. What are we trying to do? And what are our principles by which by which we're going to act. And he says we have to periodically restate these things, that you can't just let it go and expect that people are going to remember. And he says not only for ourselves, but for the new generations that are coming along. So what are we trying to do? In the Constitution of Liberty, he's saying, look, we need to clarify what our aims and principles are. What are we trying to do with society? And what are the principles that we have by which we're going to govern ourselves, right? Mises' liberalism lays out the foundations. What was that? He says liberalism is this political philosophy that's consistent with market capitalism, and we're trying to create wealth for the masses, right? So he lays out, that's the aims and the principles by which we're going to govern ourselves. And Hayek says that we have to clarify in our own minds what we want to do, and we have to be able to periodically restate this for the next generation. It's quite possible that the current generation, the millennials or whatever, haven't had that statement about what the principles are by which they want to govern themselves, or what the aims are, and why you would believe that. And again, if you look at places like Venezuela, right, that have moved from more of a market capitalist system to a socialist system and have had all sorts of problems, people fleeing and the economy's a wreck and whatever, then it would be important for the people of Venezuela to know what is going on and what these principles are. And there are countries around the world where people are having revolutions, right? Trying to get the government out and put a new government in, et cetera. Well, why would you want to have a new government? And why do you have a system such that you have to have a revolution in the streets in order to change the government? Okay? And so that's something that we need to take a look at, and is why we include the Constitution of Liberty in this class, right? And that's why we do that. Why we learn about how markets work, and then we learn the political philosophy consistent with that, and we learn about what a just government might be, and what we might consider to be a just government. And now we're going to restate some of that, and then we're going to talk about what the political structure needs to look like in order to accomplish what we're trying to do. And the next thing we're going to read is How the West Grew Rich, and what's that going to do? It's how the West grew rich. Why did the West get wealthy and Sub-Saharan Africa didn't, right? Why did the West get wealthy and Latin America didn't? And so we're going to read a history of the Western growth, and it's going to be, when we read that, what are they going to tell us? They're going to tell us that it's really a spirit of individual liberty and market capitalism, right? So why did the West grow rich? It's a system based on individual liberty and market capitalism. Now, when we look at Hayek's book, we look through the Constitution, you'll notice that it makes the same point as Bastiat. That is, you start out with a discussion of economic policy problems, right? So we're going to start out with a discussion of economics. Which is how the class is structured as well, right? With some economic discussion, and then you'll analyze the political system, right? That is, what did Bastiat say? He says a science of economics is logically prior to a science of politics. And you can see that consistency in the three authors that we talk about. And that it's also, again, consistent with, it's consistent with Bastiat, and it's also consistent with Mises laying out that why do you pick this particular political philosophy? You pick the political philosophy because you get this economic result, right? You get wealth for the masses, and that's what he's trying to do. Yeah.
Can you explain a little bit more how it is logically prior?
Why science of economics is logically prior to science of politics? Because he says that we have to figure out when people are acting according to their own plan, and they're interacting with one another, does that result in a system of social cooperation, or are they people going to be in conflict with one another? And if so, you got to know how the economic system is going to work before you can say, what's the role of government? Why do we have government? And of course, what do we figure out? Why do you need government? Because people are going to steal from one another, right? But what did Bastiat say? He said that basically the strong will prey upon the weak. Why did we form government in the first place? We formed government in the first place in order to protect ourselves, right? That's why we formed government. And so a government that goes against that is a government takes from some people and gives to another, that's an unjust government. So if I don't have an understanding about how people are going to act when we're letting them act freely, how's that economic system going to look like? If it's going to look like disaster, if I don't have a central planner out there, and you guys are just going to run around and the government's not going to be involved very much in what you're doing, if that's going to turn out to be a disaster, then I should have a central planner. If I let you guys act according to your own plan, and it turns out that creates wealth for the masses, then resources get moved to the place where consumers have the greatest demand. That's what you answered on the midterm, right? On the midterm, you noticed that if under a market system with firms competing with one another and people able to produce what they want and the central planner not telling them what to do, you notice that when consumer demand goes up, then you have this linkage of things, right? Prices go up, profit goes up, firms enter, supply goes up, resources go into that industry. So if I don't know how the economic system works, how can I determine, should the central planner decide what's to be produced and what's not, right? And so that's when we analyze the political system, we need to embed it in what's happening in the economic system first. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So the Constitution of Liberty is structured really in three sections. If you sort of to look at it, the first section is about why we want liberty. Sort of just think through the sections of the book. Okay. The first one is about why we want liberty. The second one is about what are the institutions that we've developed in attempt to secure individual liberty. It's, of course, the title of the book, The Constitution of Liberty, right? So why do we want liberty in the first place? He's talking about the introduction, right? We've got to clarify for ourselves what our aims and principles are, why we want liberty. Then the institutions that preserve liberty. He has a whole chapter we're going to talk about a democracy, right? And then of course the Constitution is one of the institutional mechanisms that we use to try to maintain the individual liberty. And then the last section is the applications of the first part. And this we're gonna leave to you to read on your own when you want. Okay, we're gonna focus on these first two chapters or sections. We're going to focus on the first 12 chapters of the book, which really deal with why we want liberty and what are the institutions that deal with it. And the others are interesting applications of that, but we can't cover everything in the course, right? So got to do how the West grew rich and the macro piece as well at the end. So some of the key terms to think about or to recognize that we're going to be talking about is we're going to talk about liberty. What does that mean? Right? So the key terms to think about is liberty. The second key term to think about is what is coercion. And the third key term that we're going to be talking about is the law. This book is really a statement about people living together, right? This is really a discussion about a philosophy of how we ought to live together. A philosophy of how we live together. Basically, a system of social cooperation. The philosophy that we're going to develop there is that, okay, what should we do? How should we organize ourselves in our society? And of course, Mises would, when Mises is talking about, he's talking about a philosophy that would result in social cooperation, right? That's one of the, when we look at the foundations of liberalism, several of the things are there so that we have to improve social cooperation or to encourage social cooperation. And so that's what this book is really about as well. It's really a statement of the philosophy of how we ought to organize ourselves in our society and how we ought to live together in a way which allows us to cooperate with one another. And of course, if we think back to one of the first lectures, we were talking about a pencil, right? And all the cooperation that's necessary just to make a pencil get here. And if you think about all the cooperation that we have to get any of the goods that you have. We mentioned if you take a look at just observe in a given week, all the things that you use that didn't exist 50 years ago. Okay, how did that all happen? Well, there must have been a lot of cooperation with people. Some people are inventing things. Some people are developing the research to have that invention happen. Some people are figuring out ways to produce it. Some people are figuring out ways to distribute it, etc. So basically, it says, if you're convinced of the importance of individual liberty, you must understand your own position, right? And also, what do you need to do? You need to be able to defend it, and you need to promote it, right? If you're not out there promoting it, then other people will be promoting things which aren't going to work out as well, right? So you have to clarify your position, right? In your own mind. And then what you have to do is you have to be able to defend it and promote it. And you have to do it in a clear, concise fashion. Because if you're not promoting it, I can guarantee you somebody else is going to be promoting the other way, right? Somebody else is going to be promoting some form of central planning. And they're going to be telling you this is the optimum way of doing it. If you don't have a clear vision of why you believe in market capitalism or why you believe in individual liberty, if you don't have that clarified, and if you can't explain it in a clear and concise fashion, then guess what? You're going to lose the battle of ideas. Why did Mises write his book in 1927? He says, look, all these problems are going to happen. World War II, the Great Depression, da-da-da-da. And why are they going to happen? Because of anti-liberal thought, right? Again, the answer on the midterm. It's not going to happen because the central bank has got the wrong monetary policy. It's not going to happen because the marginal tax rates are not right. Okay? It's going to happen because of anti-liberal thought. So what do you have to do? You have to be able to explain how markets work. You got to explain what this political philosophy is and how it's consistent with that. And you got to be able to do it in a clear fashion that the other person understands what's going on, which is exactly why you have essay questions, right? When you looked at that exam, if you were to take that exam home and give it to your parents and say, okay, I would like you to answer this, okay? See what kind of grade you'd give them, right? Would they get 3 out of 5 or 6 out of 10, right? So why do I make the exams that way is because that's what Mises and Hayek are saying, that you got to be able to explain this to somebody else. Mises saying anti-liberal thought is a problem. We need to get liberalism out there. Hayek is saying you have to restate for future generations. You have to restate those aims and principles and how it works. All right. So that leads us to chapter 1. Okay? And chapter 1 is basically the basics of liberty, right? That's what chapter 1 is talking about. And it's saying, what is that? Where we try to get a state of the world where coercion, and we'll define this in a second, where coercion is limited. Okay? That is, we're trying to make as much as possible so that whatever the state of the world that we're going to have is going to, we're trying to maximize liberty and we're trying to minimize coercion. So what is liberty? Well, we'll go over this several times, but for liberty, liberty is you act according to your own plan. That's what liberty is. And coercion is the opposite. That is, you have to act according to someone else's plan. So we're trying to maximize liberty. That's what we're trying to do. And notice that, again, if we go back and think about Mises's liberalism, you need a government, right? It says classical liberals aren't anarchists. And why is that? Because it might be that your plan is to steal my stuff, okay? And my plan is to keep my stuff. Or your plan is to shoot me because you really don't like what I'm saying, okay? And my plan is to not have you shoot me, okay? So what we're going to try to do here is come up with a set of institutions that allows us to have that largest sphere of us free action, right? Remember what we said that Bastiat was talking about, spheres of free action. And so what we're trying to do here when reading the Constitution of Liberty is to discuss, okay, how can we set it up so that we have the most ability to act according to our own plan and not be coerced by somebody else? Now, maybe you don't want to do that. Maybe you like being coerced. Maybe you want somebody else to tell you what to do. You just don't even want to have to decide, right? I mean, it could be people like that. You just say, hey, just tell me what to do. I don't want to figure this out myself, right? So there could be people that are like that. But generally, what are we trying to do? We're trying to say, hey, I'd like to have as much freedom as possible. I'd like to be able to make the plans myself and not have you keep telling me what to do. Now, in this chapter 1, he talks about that liberty is not how many courses of action are open to you. All right? So liberties is not how many courses of action are open to you. Notice Remember when Bastiat said liberty's not power, right? It's not power, right? That's what Bastiat was saying, okay? That is, it's not how many courses of action are open to you, but rather that you, given your situation, can you act according to your own plan? Given where you are, can you act according to your own plan? Given your situation, are you free to act according to your own plan? Again, I might have more options. So we were talking about this when we were talking about Bastiat, right? I may have more places that I can go on vacation than you do, okay? I have more options of what kind of car I can buy than you do. That doesn't make me more free, right? That doesn't. Freedom is the ability to act according to your own plan, not this how many. As Bastiat taught, liberty is not power. Hayek is talking about it's not how many actions are open to you. And again, of course, why is that? Because if you, as Bastiat pointed out, what is that an argument for? That's an argument for redistribution, right? That if we say that you are more free than I because you have more stuff than I do, and I want to have everybody be free, then what's got to happen? I got to take your stuff away, and I get to use it, or we distribute it out to everybody else. Okay? So again, this is very consistent with what we've been reading before. And then he makes it clear. He says, freedom is not necessarily what is political freedom. It might be, but it's not necessarily political freedom. Again, this is consistent with what the other two authors that we've been reading have talked about. That is, just because you get to vote for the dictator, right, doesn't mean that you're free, right? If I have lots of power over what you can do and what you can't do and what things get produced and how they get produced, and I can tell you you have to buy this thing and you can't buy that thing, but you get to vote for whoever gets to tell you that, right? That doesn't make you free. If we could have democracy, but if that democracy is just telling us who's going to tell us what to do, we're just picking who gets to choose what we're going to do, then you're not free. If you just listen to people discussing political issues, oftentimes that will be very confused. Oftentimes they will argue that, or they'll imply that, well, we voted on it, right? Well, we got to vote on it, then, that was fair, right? Maybe you might think of it as fair, but it doesn't mean that you have freedom. Freedom's not about political freedom. Now, what did Mises say? Mises says you can't have political freedom without economic freedom, right? And not necessarily the flip. Now, we have noted that they tend to go together. Why is that? Because if I'm a central planner, I will oftentimes need to tell you what to do in order to make the central plan happen, right? So you could have a dictator, but as I used the example, if I were dictator of the United States, and I was well read up on Mises or whatever, I would just go, okay, hey, we're going to try to minimize the total amount of coercion out there. I've read Hayek. We're going to try to let you guys act according to your own plan. We're going to have prices set things and profit move resources around, and that's what we're going to do. Okay? But generally, political freedom is consistent with economic freedom, but they're not the same thing. That's what Mises or Hayek's trying to make the point here. So he says that it is we need to talk about a system of free individuals, right? We want to talk about free individuals. That is, do you guys get to act according to your own plan? That's what we're trying to develop that system. So what's the purpose of government for Hayek? Right? So we've been talking about what the purpose of government is. The purpose of government for Mises was to make it so that market capitalism worked, right? So that, and market capitalism requires property rights, and it doesn't, market capitalism doesn't work if you have all sorts of government interference. So worked out in the foundations of liberalism. One of the foundations of liberalism is a government, but a government limited to the protection of life, liberty, and property. That's what you need for markets to work. Okay? What did Bastiat say? He said the purpose of government, right, is to our natural right to self-defense, right? Is to implement our natural right to self-defense. That's why we have government, right? We formed government why did we form it in the first place? To protect ourselves, the strong preying upon the weak, right? What's the purpose of government for Hayek? The purpose of government for Hayek is to minimize the total amount of coercion. To minimize total coercion. Or to maximize liberty. That is, to maximize this ability to act according to your own plan and to minimize acting according to someone else's plan. Now, again, you might want to steal my stuff, right? And I might want to steal your stuff. If that were the case, then we have to sort of figure out, okay, what are we supposed to do with government here? If I get to steal your stuff, right, and you don't want me to steal your stuff, then there's coercion going on, right? We'll see later on, we're talking a little bit deeper into the book, what does government do? Remember that Bastiat said law is force, right? Requiring you to do something you wouldn't otherwise do, or have you not do something that you otherwise would have done. Same thing, Hayek's going to be talking about the same thing here. That law is going to be the coercive power of government, but what's its purpose? Its purpose is to minimize the total amount of coercion. I got to have, if you want to take my stuff and I don't want you to take my stuff, then somebody's not going to get to act according to their own plan, right? And the government's going to come in and say, nah, you don't get to steal my stuff, okay? So what should the law look like if it's going to minimize that total amount of coercion? He also talks about the use of knowledge. And this brings us back to what Mises was talking about. That is, for Hayek, the use of knowledge is important. It's a focus. And one of the reasons that he won the Nobel Prize is an article that he wrote called The Use of Knowledge in Society, which is in the folder. And what is he going to talk about? The fact that information is decentralized, right? That's what Mises was talking about. The point here is that only you know how many hot dogs you're going to want today. Only you know what kind of vitamins you want to take, right? So what did we, on the midterm when we were talking about, when I had you tell me why Mises says why socialism can't create wealth for the masses, said there's an information problem, right? There's an incentive problem, but there's also an information problem. How can the central planner know how much of each of these things to make and how we ought to move resources around? Okay? And if you didn't mention that information is decentralized, I took a point off and I put in red pen. It's important to say that information is decentralized, because otherwise somebody might come up with, well, the central planner knows more than you do, right? They're smarter than you are, okay? But they still can't possibly know what you want. And Hayek is making the same point here. That is, the key to a market system is that why don't we need to have central planning? Because the information is decentralized, but in a market, where do we get that information? Through prices and profit, right? If you guys value, if you value a first folio of Shakespeare at $15 million, which it just sold for, Mills, I think Mills College just sold that at Sotheby's or whatever at auction. Okay, so we know that thing's valued at $15 million, right? We know there's a lot of value to that. I don't have to go around and survey everybody and say, oh, gee, how much would you value that, right? The price system picks that up, and if you guys want more of a particular good, what's going to happen? The price is going to go up. Demand increases, price goes up. Profit goes up, firms enter, right? So the profit system acts to give us information. If I see that you're making a lot of profit building model railroads, then what's going to happen? I'm going to go, oh, I should start building model railroads, right? Or producing them, right? So I might say, maybe I should be producing model railroads as well. So prices and profit give that information out to the producers, and you don't need to go out and survey everybody. And so what his major point here is that what is this all about, right? This is about a system of voluntary exchange, right? You aren't forced to buy anything. You aren't forced to sell anything. So this system of voluntary exchange, if I see you buying something, I know you must value it at least as whatever you had to give up in order to do that. If I see you buy a plate of spaghetti at Johnny T's for $8, I know that you valued that at least that plate of spaghetti at least $8, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't have bought it. So the point here is that this is a system of voluntary exchange, and what does that mean? It means that you guys got to act according to your own plan for this to work. Right, for this system to work. How can it be voluntary exchange if you guys don't get to act according to your own plan? If you have to, it's not voluntary exchange if I say you have to buy this, right? Or you have to give me so much of your income. It's not a voluntary exchange. And so we need liberty, we need this ability to act according to our own plan in order to solve this problem of decentralized information that Mises was talking about in the 1920s and Hayek is bringing up again in 1960. Again in this section, he says that liberty is not power, right? Which is exactly what Bastiat was talking about, right? Remember who was Bastiat talking to, right? Bastiat was in this letter to Louis Blanc, right? That's where that came up in Bastiat's book. Here he's talking about John R. Commons, who is a famous economist at University of Wisconsin, and John Dewey. And he's talking about them, and he's saying, look, was a political philosopher, John Dewey is a political philosopher, and it says, look, liberty is not freedom from obstacles, okay? It's not the power to accomplish something, right? It's not, liberty is not freedom from obstacles, right? It's not the power to accomplish for the same reason that Bastiat was talking about. Because if you define it that way, what's going to happen? This is really just an argument for redistribution, which is exactly what Bastiat was saying, right? So liberty is about given your situation, do you get to act according to your own plan, or does somebody else tell you what to do, right? That's what that's about. And the idea that I have a greater range of choices from which to things to choose from than you do, that doesn't mean I'm more free than you are. That is just an argument for redistribution, right? And that would be exactly what Bastiat said, and that would be what Mises talked about as the politics of envy, right? When Mises was talking about the politics of envy, what was he saying? I should care how wealthy the wealthiest people are. And he's saying no. If you are a society where people are free to act according to their own plan, then even if you were less wealthy than a society that was wealthier, but let's say it was a society where the government owned diamond mines, and diamonds were diamonds are a girl's best friend, right? There must be a song. Is there a song? Yeah, diamonds are a girl's best friend. Okay, so if diamonds are a girl's best friend, and then there's this huge demand for diamonds, and the price of diamonds is really high, and we've got all this economic profit being made from diamonds because we have a monopoly over diamonds, and people can't just go get them from somewhere. You could still not be free if what happened is they just told you what to do, right? Say, okay, we're handing you all this stuff, and so you have lots of things, but how do I know that you wanted those clothes? Everybody's got lots of clothes, but the government's giving you the clothes, whatever. Then you're not free in that sense. So freedom is not about the politics of envy. Freedom is not about being able to have whatever you want. Freedom is the ability to act according to your own plan. Then he points out that historically, how did we get to be free in a sense? Like if we go back, when we read How the West Grew Rich, okay, or if you see Monty Python's Holy Grail, okay, and you're looking at the feudal period, those people don't get to choose according to their own plan, right? They don't get to act according to their own plan. So historically, we didn't have a lot of freedom. And historically, how these things developed, if we just look at historically, liberty developed by the granting by the government, whether it's the king or whether it's the parliament, by the government of certain liberties. We're going to say, okay, you get to do this. Okay? We're going to allow you to do a particular thing. All right? We're going to allow you to be able to. We're going to allow you to be able to travel. Okay? Or we're going to allow you to be able to own cattle. right? Or we're going to allow you the ability to have this little piece of property and you can grow on it, whatever you want to do. So what we started out, if you just look historically in the West, which is where why did the West grow rich? Because it became have more liberty, okay? So it was the granting of particular liberties. You didn't start out with, hey, you can do anything you want unless the government tells you you can't do it, right? That's what we think today, right? You tend to think that if there's not, you're going to assume you can do something unless the government tells you you can't do it, right? That's not how it started. How it started was the government told you, here's what you can do. And you assumed you can't do things unless the government tells you that you can do it. So we started out with this idea of particular liberty. And so what is that? There's a difference between being able to do things. There's a difference between you can assume you can do things unless it's prohibited versus you assume you can't do things unless you're told you can. Obviously, the former is a much broader idea of what liberty is. And it also falls under the idea of, does the government grant you these liberties, or you have unalienable rights, right? And we form a government to protect those liberties, right? So by the time we get to the Declaration of Independence, we've moved to where we're more like this, right? We assume you can do things. You have unalienable rights. The government doesn't give you these rights. The government is there to protect those rights. And whereas if this were the Middle Ages, you tend to think that the government is what granted you the rights. Okay? It's the government that's granting you the rights rather than you have these rights and the government is protecting those rights. And so it takes centuries, right, to move from 900 AD to 1700, right? It takes a long time for that to happen. But what Hayek is saying is that is the true liberty is about having the ability to act according to your own plan, unless it's in conflict with somebody else's. Remember that in Bastiat, he says, the law can do no more than give you the free and inoffensive use of your faculties to try to make yourself better off. Okay? If you're taking my stuff, if you're forcing me to work for you, then that's not inoffensive. So Bastiat is saying the same thing pretty much in his work as Hayek is talking about here. All right, so for Monday, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking about his little section where he talks about Greece. What we're going to do is some of the chapters I'm just going to have you read and I'm going to comment on them. I'm not going to go in detail through some, and some of the chapters I'm going to go into some detail on. Chapters 2, 3, and 4 you should read, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time going over it in class. The next chapter that we're going to spend a lot of time on is going to be chapter 5. Okay? So just be, again, you're going to have to know what's in chapters 2, 3, and 4, but it's pretty straightforward, and so I'm not going to spend a lot of time, outlining it or whatever. All right? So you might look at chapters 2, 3, and 4 over the weekend.